Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock, so we'll get started. We really will get started.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Eric. So I want to make sure you're in the right room. So it's 3 o'clock, and you're here for a presentation with CDWG and 4 other school districts called Digital Educational Panel Leading Schools into the 21st Century. So we'll let Eric start off, and then I think we'll probably all introduce ourselves at some point in time.
Okay.
Thank you, Eric.
Perfect. So thank you for coming to our session today. Today, what I want to address with everyone in the crowd, but also those that are sitting on the panel, is the notion that it takes much more than just adding technology to your schools to transform education. And I can tell you this not only from my experience in working in the schools, as a former educator. My role now at CDW is education strategist, but my responsibilities at CDW are to work with our school districts to really think through all of the intangibles that need to be in place in order for technology to have a significant impact on teaching and learning. Something that I say often and isn't always well received, and maybe this is the type of audience where who knows how it's going to go over, but in all reality, the technology is the easy part. You buy the stuff, it shows up, you pass it out, but then what happens, right? For my first 2 years at CW, I've covered the entire United States. I've worked with some of the best, most progressive schools, and in the last year, we've expanded our education strategy team, and I've started focusing specifically on the West Coast. So in my time in working in the schools, as well as my time, in this position for CDW, I've seen a lot of devices added to our classrooms, and I've seen very little change in the way that our teachers teach and the way that our leaders lead. And so it's an important topic that I think needs much more attention, and I want to use this time today to ask some of the educators that we work with to share how they're overcoming this obstacle. No school that we work with is doing everything right, but there's certainly schools that are doing some things right and other schools doing others. But if we don't start having those kinds of conversations about what types of changes need to happen in our schools, things like what Drea just talked about from Google, and Android apps now working on Chromebooks, well, that's not going to matter if our teachers continue to spend the majority of the time standing in front of the class, delivering instruction to students, and instead of taking notes on paper, they now take notes on Chromebooks with Android apps, right? And so, last thing I want to mention is that it's important to know that CDW has a team of educators like myself that share these same views about technology. This is kind of a collective overview of our different skills and expertise. I come from a background of teaching and instructional technology. I've done a lot of professional development in schools. There's other folks on our team that have been in a position of CIO or CTO. So if there's those CTO type questions that I can't answer, I can always lean on other people from our team to try to get those answers. So just know that, one, CDW has a team of educators capable of having these kinds of conversations. For a really long time, we've always had this reputation as just the big box pusher, right? We can sell lots of stuff and we can give it to you on time. But we're wanting to take a much more holistic approach to what you're trying to do in your schools, because we know that if we sell you a bunch of devices and they sit there and collect dust, not only is that not good for students, but that's not really good for our business either. So the more successful that we can help you be, we feel like we're that much more successful in the long run. And the last thing that is almost the first question I always get is, well, yeah, that sounds good, but how much does this cost? And the answer is, it doesn't cost your district anything. when you're doing business with CDW, you have access to our team of expert educators, and we're more than happy to do anything we can to help you realize whatever your long-term and short-term goals are. So, I'm going to stop there. Those of you who are familiar with CDW know that we don't make any technology, but we're partnered with every major manufacturer in the industry. We've been Google's Global Education Partner of the Year 3 out of the last 4 years. We've also received multiple awards from Microsoft and Intel. So, that being said, if each one of you could, we'll start with Carmen at the end. Just briefly introduce yourself, your title, and we'll go down the road.
Hey, my name's I need that. My name is Carmen Rahm. I'm the Chief Information Officer at the Kent School District. I've been there exactly 11 months. Prior to that, I was the Chief Information Officer for Seattle Public Schools.
Good afternoon. Derrick Brown, CIO for Evergreen Public Schools. We serve 27,000 students in 37 buildings, 44 total with administrative offices, and I'm excited to be here and learn from all of you.
My name's Jennifer Wright. I'm the Executive Director of Learning and Technology Services in the Mercer Island School District. Significantly smaller, 4,000 kids, 6 schools.
Liza Klumpar with Franklin Pierce School District. I am the Director of Technology. We have 7,800 students in Grove. Parkland. That would be Tacoma.
Nice. So you hold on to that, and you guys can kind of pass it back and forth. The first question I want to start with Derrick, and the question is, if you could, talk about the shift that you're seeing in teaching and learning, and the role that IT and curriculum are playing in that transition, right? So that idea that in many districts, it's a siloed type of organization, right? And I know working with Evergreen that you guys have done some really great things in kind of bridging that gap between silos. So could you talk about how you've done that successfully?
Sure. Well, I'm very blessed to be with Evergreen. It'll be my 3rd year on Cinco de Mayo. Prior to that, I was with Portland Public Schools, and I was with another similar-sized school district down in the south. But the shift that I've seen in the last decade is the partnership. Drea can't hear me. Is this any better? No, it's not on. Is the partnership?
I think that's just making for the recording. I don't think it's good.
No,
that is a
there's
mic,
a
yeah.
speaker back.
Oh, okay.
So, teacher voice.
Yeah.
So the shift that I've seen in the last decade is the collaboration and partnership between IT, curriculum and instruction, teaching and learning, whatever you want to call it, and a seat at the table of IT as part of cabinet. We need to be there with the superintendent, with curriculum and instruction, understanding how we're going from textbooks to digital learning, digital resources. What is the adoption process? And exactly what is the scope and requirements? So my background is in project management, IT, last 20 years. And so what we have to do is figure out, what do they want? Take it back to project management methodology. What's the scope? What are the requirements? Give them the keys. We're their co-pilot. Let them drive. Let them fly. They don't have to necessarily do anything, but it starts the discussion. Grassroots. And then from there, we grow organically with the shift, and we'll get into that later. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Anyone else want to touch on that idea?
Yeah, so I'm in a small enough district that I'm actually in charge of major parts of curriculum and technology. And I think the superintendent, when he reorged about 8 years ago and put me in this position, was a genius in the sense that he's married the two, so it really isn't about technology and curriculum. It's just a learning organization that happens to have the technology support in it as well. So unlike many of you who are probably on the business side of your organization, technology, actually the IT director reports to me. And he's, so he's here to serve the curriculum, and oh, by the way, there's some business ops that have to happen. So it's because we're smaller, it's just you wear many more hats, but it has actually worked out really well in trying to make sure that what we're doing is not just buying the stuff, or not just implementing something because it looks pretty. It's like truly understanding what the connection between those two are.
Yeah.
Eric, can I add one thing on that one?
Yeah, please.
I also think that the Director of Technology or the CTO needs to be part of the cabinet. I really think that having the the technology piece or the role within the cabinet will kind of help understand the rest of the cabinet team, and it really changes the shift of how technology is within the school district. I think giving that input and feedback on the policies that that are happening and the new trends, that really helps just give that the other side of that cabinet or leadership team. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So just really quickly, one of the things that Canton previously we did in Seattle was we had a big tech summit where we invited students and parents and teachers and principals and the community and business partners to come in. Eric was there. We had the Kent one on March 18th, and it was really to bring people in to set the vision for how technology can support teaching and learning. Kent's known for having great technology, but two really quick statements, and please come to my session tomorrow where we'll go into more detail. When I interviewed there, Dr. Watts, the superintendent, during the interview process, he said, Kent is known for having great technology. I don't want a district known for having great technology. I want a district known for what it achieved with that great technology. So that's the culture shift we're trying to make. The second thing was, before I started the job, but after I'd accepted, I'm now buying a bicycle. And the young man comes up from behind the counter, and he heard me say that I'm working at the Kent School District and that I'm going to try to ride a bike to work once in a while. Hasn't happened yet, but it will. And he said, oh, what's your job? And I told him what my job was. And he goes, oh, my mom's a teacher, and I go to Kentwood High School. And he goes, Kent's got great technology. My teachers really don't know how to use it very well in the classroom, but Kent's got great technology. So that's the kind of things that we're trying to partner and transition, because technology can't drive the classroom. We've got to switch it, and the classroom's got to drive the technology, and I am a true believer in that.
Yeah, that's great. And Jennifer, to echo something that you'd said, sometimes being in a smaller district is an advantage, because it's almost as though there's less silos and sometimes less of the political stuff that we have to deal with, and so I totally agree there. I've seen the same things. So to kind of piggyback off of that initial question, what kinds of things is your curriculum and IT staff doing to stay up to date and relevant with current trends in teaching and learning needs? And one of the things that I think is probably most relevant to the audience today is the new law in Washington regarding media literacy, digital citizenship, internet safety, so on and so forth. So,
So what Eric's talking about is Governor Jay Inslee and other leaders passed a law for digital citizenship, media literacy, and internet safety. We've been on this path at Evergreen Public Schools for almost 3 years now. And so that started with competency, making sure we know we have the right people, but are they in the right seat? From teacher librarians to teachers to instructional coaches to even technicians. And are we prepared for the path that we're about to go on? And a lot of it was questions. We don't know. Learning from others. We met with Eric, we met with a lot of the CDWG team, visited quite a few school districts, went to Kent when Twan was still there, and a lot of conferences and just constant learning and research. And what we found out was, A, we haven't had a textbook adoption in 12 years, so that made it pretty easy to move this direction. We didn't have any technology in the classroom, so to speak. We had desktops that were 10, 12 years old, purchased with bond in 2002. So our teachers were in a famine. They were starving. So that made it a little easier for us. This also was a vision of the school board and the superintendent. So when they hired myself, a deputy superintendent who will be the superintendent in August, and an assistant superintendent of teaching and learning, that the three amigos, we were hired to bring forth their vision, which made it a lot easier for us. We weren't pushing the rock uphill. And so what we did have to become is evangelists and tell teachers why this was important. They were asking for curriculum, so we just said it's not going to be a textbook, it's going to be digital. Let's focus on core, let's focus on supplemental, let's start piloting and doing very similar to what Carmen did, and asking them what they want, and then trying to meet that goal. We're still on that journey. We have our first adoption in about 2 weeks of K-5 math curriculum that our team wrote, and then from there we're buying others, and we'll get into that later.
So on March 17th, I was touring some schools with a gentleman named Jim Lingle. He was the one who facilitated the tech summits that we had. we're in one of the elementary schools, and we had invited students as young as grade 4 to participate in our summit. And the principal looked at us and he said, Carmen, he says, I think you've really messed up. He said, you shouldn't be having students as young as grade 4 attend the summit. They don't really know what they want. He said, we really have a vision already planned out for our school, and having them attend, he said, I think is going to detract from your summit. And Mr. Lingle, who facilitates these events around the world, turned around and looked at him and said, we were just talking to one of your 5th grade classes, and we asked them what ideas do they have for how to use technology to augment education, and every hand went up, and every idea they had was a good idea. You know, so to me, it's not just getting the ideas from the teachers. The students as young as grades 4 and 5 were standing up and throwing out ideas, and they were phenomenal ideas as to how they want to learn. So, you know, it's great. We're trying to involve the teachers more, and I think that was a bridge that hadn't been fully built yet. But we're going beyond that. The parents have a say. And I'll end with this. When I was in Seattle and I was talking to the head of the Principals Association when we were putting our summit together to create this vision, I said, you probably think it's strange that IT is leading this and not teaching and learning. And the head of the Principals Association looked at me and said, no, if teaching and learning were leading this, I wouldn't let any of my principals attend. Because teaching and learning thinks sometimes that teaching and learning is the interaction between the teacher and the student, and it's so much more. It's how do you involve the parent. It's the front office when there's a kid coming in with a bloody nose and parents on the phone and 3 teachers standing there wanting something. You've got to include all that if you're truly going to build a learning environment with technology that supports 21st century learning. So we're trying to really encompass the entire spectrum of people that are involved.
So we failed a bond in 2000, and it's probably the best thing that happened to us because it forced us into making some changes around input and who was involved in decision making and that kind of thing. And so we've had an active, you know, community teacher and sometimes students group going since 2001. And I've been involved since 2001 in the committee, and I think it really forced us to think about what are all the voices as we move forward in what we're doing. And they sometimes come with some harebrained ideas, but or sometimes some very Mercer Island is a suburb of Seattle, and we're actually a bedroom community for many Microsoft employees and Amazon employees, and so they know about technology we don't even know about yet, you know, and so that sometimes it's applicable, sometimes it isn't, but it's just the idea that you're asking for that input and people know that there's people that are giving that input, and it goes beyond just a teacher, what do you want in the classroom, because a lot of times they just don't know, and so then you end up down a path.
I think as well for us is having that great relationship with the vendors. I think that, you know, having that, finding out what's the new trend. Kelvin does such a good job when we do find something that, you know, we ask our vendors and says, hey, have you heard of any of this? And then, of course, they work with other districts that probably have used that tool already, and so we're able to go ahead and connect with those districts. And so just keeping up to date to the trend by partnering with vendors and be kind with them because they will definitely give you the discount that you need. That's Calvin.
That's great.
I'd like to add one more thing, Eric.
Yeah.
One of the things that we started off talking about was Washington State law and digital citizenship and media literacy. So if you don't have devices and you're wondering where do you start with educating your teachers on what is digital citizenship so that they can then educate the students. Internet safety, footprints, behavior. You don't need devices to start down that path. And that will take, you know, a year plus. We work with our ESD, we have videos, we have parent videos that 25 to 35 minutes long. And so we started 2 years ago with just awareness and communication. We started with our principals for a whole year, and then we went from there to a smaller group of teachers, and we're now at year 2.5, and we're just starting to get beyond 100 teachers. We're going to be going district-wide with devices, but we're really starting small with a pedagogical shift. A little plug for you, because I know it's probably coming up.
That's great. Hey, that's exactly, I was going to, before we moved on, mention something about that. When we say digital citizenship or digital literacy, is it just for students?
No.
Probably more
For parents.
For parents, and teachers, right? Okay, a lot of IT in here, right? How many people get a question that's like, hey, do you have the website for Google Classroom? And you're like, really? Like, and you, or maybe it's something you don't know. But when I was first an instructional technologist, I didn't have my master's in instructional technology. So, but a lot of times what I did is I'd get these emails from teachers, and I would copy the question, paste it in Google, hit enter, find the answer, and then send it back to the teacher. I'm like, are you serious? And people would be like, Eric, oh my God, you're so smart. I'm like, no, I'm not. You know what I mean? So like, we have to get to a point where teachers are not asking questions in an email that they can Google themselves. Until we get there, how can they possibly teach kids about digital citizenship or digital literacy? They don't have that skill themselves, right? And the other thing that is just crazy to me, where's the first place that kids go to learn anything today?
Online, YouTube.
YouTube.
Yeah.
What's one of the most blocked websites in schools today?
Facebook.
Is that like a chasm in like thought process there? There's tools out there to help us manage and keep kids safe while on things like YouTube. The other thing is things like Twitter. I had an instance talking about digital citizenship and digital literacy. When I was an instructional technologist, I went into this classroom and we had kids Google their names, right? Has everybody Googled their name at least once? It's an activity everybody should do at least once, just to see what comes up, right? Sometimes it's good, sometimes you have a porn star that also has your name, and it's not so good, you know? But anyway, so this kid Googles his name, and I'm sitting there next to him, like kneeling, you know, down next to his desk. And the third search result comes up. It's a tweet that says, I'm at the gym checking out this Asian bitch thinking about raping her. And I'm like, woo, no. And this kid was like captain of the football team, AP honors, this, that, and the other. Ended up getting a full ride to Harvard to play football. But if Twitter and social media had been blocked in our district, we would have never found that tweet. We would have never had that teachable moment, and that kid goes on and fails. And he probably gets a scholarship to play football somewhere, but it's not at Harvard, right? So give teachers that professional autonomy to say, you know what, the election's going on right now, and all of the news in the world that's going to happen first happens on Twitter. And give that teacher the autonomy to say, I'm going to unblock Twitter, and I'm going to use that for this hour because it's really educational, and then I might block it for my next class because maybe it doesn't make as much sense, right? But that won't happen until our teachers are digitally literate, our administrators are digitally literate, the adults in the school need to be digitally literate first, all right? All right, so moving on. If you could talk briefly about what are some of the things that your school is doing to address the digital equity or the access, the connectivity gap, or supporting students without access at home. Jennifer,
So
go ahead.
I'm going to talk about digital equity just in general. I live in a community that has very little free and reduced, and we have many actually hotspots on the island. And so we take home 612, and so kids can pretty much find a place to connect if they don't have a connection at home. So that's not our digital equity issue, but I think our digital equity issue is around the fact that we still got teachers who don't know how to attach an attachment to an email. And so when this creation project is going on and we're doing a communication standard out of the ELA standards in a first grade classroom with book reports, and this teacher hasn't even a clue how to get started, that's our equity problem. And the way that we solved it with boots on the ground, we have 5 instructional co-sits for 6 buildings. So we have lots and lots of people that are there to actually handhold and make sure that that the kid is getting the equitable experience, because that's what always bothers me. You know, I really could care less if the person knows how to attach an attachment to an email. They'll figure out something else how to get that information to somewhere. But the kids in that classroom, that's the only time they're in 2nd grade. And so I need to make sure that they get that. And so we've solved that with boots on the ground and intentional technology coaches that are all excellent teachers, instructional people.
Unlike you, I live in a district that has a very high free and reduced lunch. The Kent School District is the most diverse school district in the state of Washington, number 1. We have a lot of refugees and a high free and reduced lunch. We're the 11th most diverse district in the nation. And so, being a one-to-one program, it's great, but we also know that when those students take those devices home, that inequity exists. So, I don't know if the CIO, I forget his name, from the Yakima School District is here for this event or not, but he implemented something that we've been looking at implementing in the Kent School District, and they call it SHEAP. But it's SHEAP, and it stood for the Safe Harbor Educational Access Portal. And I was really thrilled by hearing about this because we were talking about the same thing at Kent, which was doing a better job at partnering with the businesses, the McDonald's, the Starbucks, all the businesses that have internet access, and say, don't kick our students out. We'll give you a certificate suitable for framing. You can put it in there. Let our students come and use your internet. Maybe just, maybe you want to set hours during your non-peak hours. But they were telling stories about, students who McDonald's would come and kick them out because they had to spend $1 an hour or they got kicked out, and they didn't have $1 to buy for a Coke because they're like an 80–85% free reduced lunch. They found students hiding in bushes outside McDonald's trying to finish their homework. And so, that's one of the things we're doing. I'm meeting with with the Kent Chamber of Commerce later this month to try to get that going. We're also subscribing to the Sprint 1 million program. I don't know if you've heard about that. And where Sprint is giving out, they want to give out over like 1 million access ports and access over the next 5 years for low-income students to be able to access the internet. I was fortunate enough to be on Mayor Murray's digital access, digital equity team and an advisory team in Seattle. So we're trying to mirror that in Kent, which is make sure everybody has a device, make sure everybody has the training, and make sure that everybody has connectivity. So
I want to just tell a quick story, something that lesson learned that I'm never going to do again, but I'm going to. I can't believe that I'm publicly going to tell you this story. So one of our office manager contacted us and said, hey, do you have 10 desktop that you've surplus that I can give to a manager from an apartment so that they can use it for their kids after school? I said, we have to go through the surplus process, blah, 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 blah. A month later, she had sent me a newspaper clip, copy and paste, believe it or not, and sent it to me from News Tribune. And it was, the heading is that, making a difference. And she said, this is what you missed. And that really broke my heart. So from now on, I've told myself that we're going to partner with our communities because this is all about the students and getting them out of trouble and just getting them busy in any way that possible that you can just help them with. And so just providing those surplus computers so that they can just be done with their homework or something that really helps. That will provide some of that support.
Let me add one thing on that if I can. One of the staff from the Kent School District, I don't know if he's still in the room, he's doing a presentation later this week on our program to do that called our STAR program, where I forget what it stands for, but we give away our 5th-year computers after they've went through their 4 years in the one-to-one. We give them away to the community. We have a program, and we don't just sit there and hand them out. They have to come in, they have to apply, they have to be in free and reduced lunch. We bring them through a process. I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go down and check this out for an hour one day when they're giving them away. 5 hours later, my wife texts me and goes, that's a long hour. It was so inspirational to watch these little kids, in the school district walk out holding a computer like a puppy because they've got their first computer they're taking home and their parents are there. We make them go through some training. We make them, check off. We give them everything that they need to be successful. We give them a free year of atomic learning through our atomic learning subscription. So we're trying to put those devices in the hands of the families of students in the school district so that digital equity and that digital citizenship can permeate, and it makes such a difference. So if you see an opportunity to attend that, I'm sure you would appreciate that.
So 60 seconds here. One of the other things that we're doing, in addition to everything that you just heard, is we are partnering with not only the community, but our local cable company. And I can't tell you who it is. It's a big one. But call your cable company, find out what they're doing, and in addition to Home Essentials, so that tells you who it is, we don't need the routers in homes. We have over 1,000 students that are displaced. Their grandmas, their aunts, they're all over. So when they go home with this device, they need a hotspot. Well, this cable subscriber is pretty big in our community, and we want to the district pay for a subscription. The subscription would belong to the school. The teacher librarian would own it and issue it to the students. What we love about that is it's an unlimited data plan. We also are looking at Sprint. Sprint doesn't work well. It's very iffy in our region. Khajiit, we're trying it out. That's also iffy. So there's not going to be one silver bullet. You're going to have to try a bunch of different things. But like Carmen, what we're doing in Evergreen, we're trying to do it for all of Clark County. I also have talked to the CIO of Clark County, Sam Kim, and also to the Multnomah County Deputy CIO, Bob Leake. We're having lunch next week to talk about this is all students. And so we don't want to make it just about Evergreen public schools. This is a national problem, and we need help from our partners in our community.
Thank you.
We're big, and we should not be ashamed to ask for help from everyone in the community.
Who has not heard of Everyone On? Okay, decent number. All right, so I'll do this real quick. So Everyone On, you can share it with your parents or your students. You type in your zip code. Then you answer a couple of questions. Are you low income, at or below 35,000 a year?
Gotta shift to the right.
We can't see.
Oh, sorry. Do you live in public housing? You know, they answer a couple of these questions. Participate in Medicaid. And then you click View Offers, and according to whatever their criteria was entered in, then the program will spit out providers in the area that offer access to the internet at low prices. So 1 internet offer, 8 computer offers, and 5 computer training locations. So the internet offer is $10 per month. So you can see the options there. Again, like Derrick said, it's not going to be the silver bullet answer for everyone, but it might address a good percentage of your students, and they might be able to do internet for $10 a month. You know, so something to be aware of for sure. Everyoneon.org. Okay. So related to this access conversation and digital equity is the idea of digital use. Okay, and this was in the National Education Technology Plan that came out I think in December of 2016. And what I mean is, I think there's a really big difference between equitable access and equitable use of technology. And so if you have, for example, you have on one side of the hall, you have teacher A who is blogging with students, and they're bringing in experts from the field using Google Classroom or Skype. They're doing virtual reality in the classroom. They're bringing in authentic audience to get feedback from people outside of the four walls of the classroom. They're doing some progressive, innovative things to really use technology to transform teaching and learning. And on the other side of the hall, you have a teacher who's scanning worksheets and turning them into PDFs and then passing them out in Google Classroom and telling kids to read an article from a website and using Kahoot to do multiple choice questions. Is that equitable? Are those kids getting the same kind of experience on one side of the hall as they are on the other? I would argue that it's not at all, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, when we did the tour on March 17th before the summit, and Jim Lingle went around with us, and afterward he gave us a review because he likes to go in and see what's going on in the district, and he came back, and we've all probably heard of the SAMR model that we talk about: substitute, augment, modify, and replace, or I think
Redefine.
Redefine, okay,
Yep.
close enough.
Close enough.
And afterward, he gave us a report, and he says, in touring all the schools that I went to and all the classrooms that I went to, he says, I saw about 30% of your teachers that weren't using the technology at all, okay? He said, I saw about 20 to 25% of your teachers that were substituting. They're reading the textbook, and it's on the computer. He said about another 20% were really doing some modification and augmenting, but he goes, it's nothing you probably couldn't have done without the technology. The technology made it easier. And then he said, I saw that 30% of your teachers that were doing things so incredibly creative with the technology that you would never be able to do without it. So it's not answering your question, but in reality, you know, you do have those teachers that are doing things so creative. And when, you know, you hear the statistics that I know we're in Oregon, that's okay, that Washington State, the Puget Sound area will have 740,000 tech jobs over the next 5 years. Certain amount of those students are being better prepared for those than the others because they're being exposed to creative technology use versus the others who are being exposed to just substituting it for something
right,
else.
Right.
When we started on this journey 3 years ago, our superintendent pulled all the principals together and told them his experience. He's been in education now 49 years. He's retiring at the end of July. Last 11 years as superintendent. He was across the river in Oregon. But at any rate, he brought all the principals together and he shared the vision. He said, this is where we're going. And if you're not excited about where we're headed with access, equity, digital curriculum, resources for our kids, and you're not going to lead this work, then you probably don't want to be here. Could have heard a pin drop. Because we have been known in Evergreen as being autonomous. It's kind of your building, it's your style. There really wasn't a framework for teaching and learning. Teachers came in, and yes, you know, it's kind of Common Core, but grab your own resources and teach to the best of your ability. And now we're bringing that in a little bit and going to have a floor, if you will. There's no ceiling, but there's a minimum, and you have to teach to this minimum. And that work has now started, as I mentioned earlier. It started with the principals last year, grassroots with a few teachers, but we partnered. We had to spend quite a bit of money so that we could learn from others. The district supported that because you can't do this. There is a cost to some of it. You have to get on the phone, you have to do webinars, you have to do a lot of rolling up your sleeves and talking with others, but then also getting and partnering with a consultant or CDW to learn how to teach your staff. And they basically came in with a scope of work for a year and a half to work themselves out of a job so that we could do it ourselves. And we're at that point where they're working themselves out of a job. We're going to take over the reins, and we're going to kind of do a rinse and repeat with the rest of our staff. And that's going to take 3 to 5 years. We've also partnered with HR. We have talked to the union. This is a big deal, so that teachers aren't where we need them to be at the end of 3 years now, 3 more years, then they will have worked themselves out of a job. We will set all the milestones in place, we will make them successful, but they have to show effort. Because without doing that and just providing digital curriculum and access, we will not help our kids achieve success.
Jennifer, before you go, one thing that I love about what Derrick said was that you started with principals, and there's a ton of research to show that principals have a significant impact on the overall success of an initiative. And the most easy example that I can share is that you have a staff meeting and your building principal walks in with the agenda printed out, and you pass out those notes to all the teachers in the room in a one-to-one district. What kind of expectations is that building leader setting for every single teacher in that school, right? We talk about training and professional development for staff, and I think professional development for administrators is one of the most needed activities for a school district, and oftentimes one of the least areas of investment for school districts. Go ahead, Jennifer.
So what I was thinking is that we started with a vision, and it really had nothing to do with technology. Now it had everything to do with teaching and learning, and really we were visioning, right, and came up with a series of what we call fundamentals, but they around high standards, risk takers, personalized learning, equity and access, and diversity, and so those fundamentals were what was leading the work. And then it was like, oh, you know, we could do this thing called one-to-one, and that could move the fundamentals forward. So we always thought of it as the vision first and these fundamentals and then the technology. So then when we start talking about utilizing the technology, we're utilizing it in support of the fundamentals as opposed to utilizing the technology for technology's sake. So my degree's in engineering, so I was an engineer for 10 years before I was an educator. And, you know, we did technology, but you used a piece of paper and a pencil sometimes, right? So we're 4 years into a one-to-one program, and I finally have teachers not apologizing to me when I walk in the room and say, I had the iPads out a little while ago. And I'm like, I don't really care. What's the best use of what you're doing? It's obviously not the technology. because that's what our goal is. Remember, our goal is back to those fundamentals. And so I think having that kind of touchstone has really helped shape the idea that the technology is not there for technology's sake. The technology there is to support, but really what we're doing is teaching kids, right? And then there's a lot of things that we utilize in the district in order to make that happen.
Yeah. So I like how you mentioned having that vision of what you want it to be, and that it's based on teaching and learning. And the thing I think you would totally agree with is also a vision of what that's going to be 3 to 5 years down the road, and then working your way backwards from there to put in the necessary steps to ensure that you achieve that outcome. So many schools that we work with will buy the technology, they pass it out, and they're like, oh, let's just see what's going to happen. And it's a disaster, and they put out a bunch of fires, and now they're planning year 2. And then when year 2's over, then they plan year 3. I can promise you, no company in the world operates like that. Every time I mention anything along those lines to the companies that we work with, and I say, oh, backward planning, long-term goals, they're like, yeah, obviously that's how you work. But very few schools are doing things that way. And I think along those same lines is this idea, if a private company was failing to make a profit, no one would expect that giving all the employees new devices, getting some new software and upgrading the network, but changing nothing in the business model is going to cause this company to turn around and all of a sudden they start making a profit. But it's almost the exact same logic that we use in education today to try to transform our schools, right? And that's not to say, like, shame on you, but we know better and we should do better, right? Because it's about students. It's not about what adults think or what's most convenient for adults. It's about what's doing right for kids. So along the lines of that digital access and the digital use divide, I think at the core of that is a lack of training and professional development for teachers. We talked about the need for principals, but there's also a need, obviously, for teachers. But I'll say this, 9 out of 10 schools that I work with who call CDW and they say, hey, we're really excited, we just passed this bond, we're going to buy 5,000 devices, and we're going to give every student a device. We're so excited about this, right? And I say, cool. Tell me about your plans for professional development. And I get a couple of different kinds of answers. One, most common, is we don't have time or money for professional development, which that last slide tells you why that won't work. Or the other thing I get is when I say describe professional development for me, they describe training. And here's what I mean. Training is, what buttons on my computer do I push so I can get Google Classroom to push out an assignment? What buttons do I push so I can collaborate on a Google Doc? What buttons do I push so OneNote can do this in Office 365? That's training. That's not professional development. Professional development is focused on pedagogy. It's focused on the instructional approach in the classroom. It's changing the dynamics of teaching and learning for students. But how often schools are doing training versus professional development? Most times, it's mostly just training. And the problem is that technology is great because it's constantly changing and improving and getting better. But it's also really bad because it's constantly changing and improving and getting better. So what happens? We have to constantly change the way we do training for teachers, and we're doing training all the time with our teachers. And so what doesn't end up happening? The professional development. And as all 4 of the panelists have said so far, it's not just about the technology. It's about the pedagogy, it's about the teaching, it's about the relationships. So I'm curious to hear, you can call it whatever you want, but how have you addressed this difference between training and professional development? How are you addressing both? And I'm not trying to knock training. I got feedback on a presentation the other day that I was bashing training, and I think that person missed the point. I'm not bashing training. There's a need for training that we have to teach the teachers how to use this stuff. It's just not good if all we do is training and we don't also do professional development. So could you guys elaborate on that a little bit?
I'll start.
Yeah.
Or why don't you start?
Okay, I'll start. For us, actually, it's more, it's driven by the TPEN, the teacher's evaluation. I think when that came along, it kind of gave the teachers a different side of what really is the growth in terms of their own growth. And so the collective of evidence of what they've done, and then sharing that, and then also asking what else do we need as to grow in our teaching area. That's how that's our focus. Yeah.
So one teacher may say, I need more training to grow. Another teacher may say, I need professional development to grow.
And we share. It's a collaborative approach.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So being in charge of both sides of the house actually makes it a lot easier in my situation. But when we ran our first levy, we put professional development in, and we've always put professional development in. So to give you an idea of the size, so I have about $2.8 million to spend every year on technology, and $500,000 goes to our teachers. It's part of their ARC in their contract, and then there's requirements around that, and then another $500,000 goes to pay for my courses. So I'm spending $1 million of the 2.8, so almost a third on professional development of varying kinds. But the way we get around that training versus professional development is nobody, there's requirements about a day that they have to attend and some after-school trainings that they have to attend. None of those trainings are all none of those professional development activities are all training. So I might have to explain how to push out that document, but then let's talk about how we're using it in a classroom. How is it supporting a second grade curriculum? I got a second grade teacher in front of them saying, this is what I've done and this is how it's moved it forward. This is how we've got some higher order thinking out of this activity, those kinds of things. So we give them a little bit of training because they got to know how to use the stuff. But really the focus is on what's happening in the classroom.
Within the context. Yeah.
Within the context.
Our model at Evergreen is very similar to Jennifer's at Mercer. And I'm fortunate because Educational Technology is on my team, as well as the teacher librarians and media specialists. So they all roll up. We just hired Director of Innovation and Teaching and Learning. He was with Portland Public as a teacher, principal. He's known as an innovator, so we're very fortunate to have hired him. He's finishing his first year, and he's helped us leapfrog because we do have TOSAs, we have instructional technology trainers, and it is a blend in the classroom with teaching and learning for that training versus PD, and we do it together.
When I came to Kent a year ago, one of the areas that was going to be divested from the IT department was what we call tech integration, which is the educational computing, the educational instructional technology training. And I went to the superintendent and I brought in my presentation, and I fought long and hard to say that needs to stay in IT, and I was successful, and it was the right thing to do, because we look at our staff as saying, in IT we train how to use the equipment. In TI, tech integration, we train how to apply it in the classroom and get the pedagogy out of it, whether it be Canvas, whether it be OneNote, whether it be a class policy or any of the other things that go there, because it really is so critical to get that in there. My senior project manager is sitting back here in the audience, and one of the things that her and I discuss all the time is I say the 4 Ps. Every project has the 4 Ps. When you fund a project, you fund the 4 Ps, and the 4 Ps are have enough to do the project, meaning whether you got to buy hardware, software, consulting. Have enough to do the project management, because if we're going to do the project, we're going to do it right. Have enough to do the process improvement, because things are going to have to change, and we're going to have to change how we do things sometimes, not just replace it. And have enough to do the professional development. If we can't fund all 4 Ps, we don't do the project.
That's great. Yeah, I like that idea. And one thing that I think some of the more progressive schools that we work with are doing is they're saying, okay, we're going to buy X number of devices, and we're going to tack on $30 per teacher per device, or not per teacher, $30 per device, whatever that costs. So let's say the device costs $200. Well, we're going to budget $230, and that $30 per device is going to go towards professional development. And then that way, when you go to present this to the board, it's not we need $1 million for devices and then $200,000 for PD, because the board immediately is going to be like, PD, $200,000? No way, we're not doing that. Buy the devices and we'll figure it out, right? Because what does the board know? In all honesty, boards drive me crazy. It's like Mr. Plumber, Mr. Doctor, retired teacher. I've worked with schools to put together this awesome strategic plan built out over 5 years, and they're like, nope, that's not fast enough. We want to be one-to-one yesterday. And they derail everything. Everything. And I'm like, what the hell do you know about this?
I just
What?
want to let you know I'm a school board member for Eatonville School District.
Well, I would feel good with you on my school board. Not all school board
I've
members.
worked with school boards that are here and here. I've told you the two
Yeah.
schools I've
Oh,
been at,
yeah.
and boy, are they opposite of each other. Which is great.
Exactly.
So one of the strategies
you know what I'm
that
saying.
I've used with our school board, so we're tech heavy, so 4 of the 5 current board members are either startup guys, low digit Microsoft employees, or somehow related to, or one's a computer science PhD and teaches at the university level. And so I invite them to every single PD I do, right? Because I want them to understand what it is that this equipment is doing in the classroom. Because we had one that was like, why aren't you one-to-one in kindergarten yet? I'm like, well, I haven't figured out a need yet, but let's, we'll start there. But anyways, I mean, so they, it's really about education of the board. And when you think about it, their only experience with school is their own experience, and then their kid's experience. And then their kid don't tell them everything. You never do computer programming in your classroom. Well, we have this actually sizable 6th grade robotics unit that we do in science that all 4 of his sons had done, but he knew nothing about it. Because the kids didn't talk about it, right? That kind of thing. So, I mean, anything you can do to educate the board, because you're right, you have to get them on track to support all the pieces in order to make it successful. Your idea before P's.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so we're running out of time, but I always like to leave a little bit of time at the end for any audience questions, because we've gotten a lot of feedback on this type of panel, and people are always saying, oh, I wish I could have asked the question. So, any questions from the audience? Otherwise, you're going to have to listen to me talk.
I got one here. So, do you deal directly with the principals then? Is that who's driving the teachers' enthusiasm, if you will, about some of the training? What I find from my limited perspective here is that we have some teachers that are just gung-ho about it, and really it's about 30%. And then I've got 60%, well, another 30 that maybe are on the fence, and I've got 30% that just don't want to do anything more. Who's driving it? Is it the principal? Do you bring someone else in that does that? Do you do coaches or chairs within that, like a champion model? How does that work for you, and who's actually driving the enthusiasm?
So 1 second. So just so everyone could hear, he was asking who's driving the enthusiasm with the teachers in the school district. If it's not the principals, who else would it be?
Both adaptation to the tech and also the training component of that, professional development.
Okay.
I would say it varies, but that's why I wanted so hard to keep tech integration in the IT department, because I knew that they were the teachers. They wanted to be technology. They've got their certifications, and they're heavy into technology. So I wanted that team, and I've expanded that team since I started in Kent. So they're the ones out there promoting it to the teachers who are really gung-ho about this. So take Canvas as our learning management system, for example. We created the Canvassador program. I thought that was a cool name. I didn't come up with it. But the Canvassador program was to bring in 50 to 60 teachers who really are gung-ho about a learning management system and everything that Canvas can do for us, train them, give them the tools, give them the stipends, give them the support they need, build them up through the Canvassador development program, and then have them go back into their schools, and as a part of their training and as a part of the stipend that they get, have them then as a requirement share that and build it out across the schools. So it really is trying to be a bottom-up sort of a structure when doing that. It's also important to get the principals on board, but programs like the Canvassador program and things like that have been very successful for us, because we can't go out and train 1,500 teachers, but we can train 50 or 60, and if they each train 30 or 40, and pretty soon, you really help trickle that across your district.
So similarly, we call it the zombie apocalypse.
My name was cool. Yours is better.
And we just started with innovation centers, and this innovation center process started. So Dr. Steege came from Canby, where he was superintendent, and he brought this pilot program over to Evergreen, and we created a rubric, if you will, shared it with all the principals. So started with the principals, and then we said, you need buy-in from your teachers, you need buy-in from your community. Here's the application process. Out of 37 schools, we received 15 applications. We accepted 9. And then once we went through that process with the principals, we said, okay, now select 6 to 10 teachers. We don't want the gung-ho. We want the naysayers as well, because they're going to influence a lot more people. And so we are in our second year of those 60-ish people finishing. We started without devices. It wasn't the plan, but through some failures and the pilot programs of digital curriculum and resources, we were able to spread and go deep very fast for teachers to get their head around the pedagogy. What does this mean? How am I going to use it? And how's it going to help students learn? What are the personalized learning opportunities? What are the outcomes? And then now we're starting to bring devices in. We're in our second year. They just got classroom sets. So through some failures, it worked to our advantage. Principals, this cohort of naysayers and some go-getters, back to their buildings, zombie apocalypse, one bite at a time.
I think there's a
Oh, the TPAP?
yeah. Well, I mean, just the connection. So there is a time when you have to use the evaluation system, to be perfectly blunt. You know, and so in Washington State, it's called TPAP, a Teacher Principal Evaluation Program. But there are criterion that teachers have to meet, and that's one leverage that a principal has if they need to go there. I mean, most principals would prefer not to have to go there, and we're very much an organic up kind of organization. I think all four of us are in some respect. But I mean, there are times when the principal just has to step into that leadership role and take it. So then that means that your principals have to be on board that this is good for kids. And I think that's my messages around principals. I don't really care if they know everything about the technology, but they need to understand the reason why we're doing it and why it's good for kids.
What's best for kids?
Yes, it's best for kids. I think for us, we have a technology advisory committee that represents each school. And so that is actually a liaison between our technology and our teaching and learning and the school. So they share what we've done or what's going to be in the future and what comes in terms of professional development. So they are our best friends in terms of technology.
All right, let's go over here for one last question.
Okay, I have a question about your strategic plan for your deployments and your PD. Do you have an assessment tool for that? How do you assess how what you've done is working as opposed to just having a great PD and a great deployment? Is there an assessment built into your strategic plan?
No. So it comes in various forms. Yes, we do surveys. Yes, we have tools. We just hired a new cabinet member, Chief Academic Cow, formal name, but Chief Academic Accountability Officer. This superintendent in Coeur d'Alene is coming back to Washington to lead up this effort, and so that we can measure. It's not just KPIs, it's all the things that we've purchased. How is it affecting outcomes? And we're starting that journey now. Yeah.
You know, I would kind of go along with Derrick as to, you know, I don't see anything, you know, flashing out there going, you know, here's our assessment, but yet within our strategic plan, you know, teaching and learning, we have a new, with a new superintendent, a new board member, or a new chief accountability and assessment also, and every division within the organization has performance criteria built into our strategic plan, metrics. One of the ITs when I got there was, probably all have this, I think it's stupid, first call resolution. Oh, first call resolution, big deal. I've told my staff, I want to push first call resolution down. I only want us to be doing 50% of our calls on the first, not 70, because I want them not to have to make the call, okay? And so we're doing things like that, but with regards to in-class instruction, how much professional development, how comfortable the teachers feel, you know, with the tools and things like that, that's part of all of the new criteria that we have in IT for our assessment, but it goes beyond that for across the district, so.
So Bright Bites is, it's not a company that we're partnered with, but Bright Bites is one a solution that a lot of schools we work with are using for assessment. The one thing that I hear about Bright Bites is a lot of schools think it's not the most cost-effective solution. However, I think those same schools could probably dig deep into where they're spending money and probably find some money that could be reallocated into something like Bright Bites to assess the effectiveness of the initiative. And the other thing I would say is check out the Future Ready Digital Learning Readiness Assessment. This is an assessment that was created by the Office of Ed Tech at the Department of Education. It is a $1.5 million assessment that they spent and invested money in creating. And the thing that's really cool about this is that they encourage stakeholders from all the different silos in a district to sit down at a table and take this assessment. It's a free assessment to take. And then what it does is it gives you, you can see here, there's an overall readiness score of 5.8 out of 10. And it will, as I scroll down, you can see here, according to the different gears in the assessment, you can see how your district has scored according to each one of these different gears. So whether it's, you know, curriculum, instruction, and assessment, or use of time, data and privacy, professional learning, so on and so forth. But it goes, but wait, there's more. You scroll down, and I get to the curriculum and assessment, and it drills even deeper into 6 different categories of the curriculum and assessment, and then it does a formal gap analysis, and will tell you gap 1.1, here's the gap that's been identified, and here are some strategies to close that gap. And then what our education strategy team does is I talked to Tom Murray at the Office of Ed Tech, and I said, dude, this assessment's awesome. Is this something that we could use at CDW? Because it's free. I'm not trying to sell it to anybody. I just want to provide it to schools as a tool that they can use. He said, yeah, absolutely. You guys can then help us take it to scale. So then we'll work with a district, and we'll identify the gaps, and then the gaps that get identified, I say, well, according to this gap, school X, Y, and Z that I've worked with in the past, here's what they did to close that gap. So there's no need for you to go and reinvent the wheel to try to close these gaps. Let us help you. And it isn't necessarily like, oh, well, we sell this to close this gap. It could be, well, you can do this for free to close this gap, and here's how. Here's what they did, right? So while it's not the perfect instrument for free, and knowing that it was $1.5 million to develop this thing, it's pretty darn good. So if you're interested in learning more about this, feel free to reach out.
I think another thing too with the assessment piece is that you need to think about what are you assessing. So we're assessing over the course of the year 7 fundamentals, and there's a technology component in each one of those. But there isn't a tech assessment. It's really about about what makes your system work and what are your priorities in your system. And so I always are putting in we do quantitative and qualitative measures in those reports, but it's really not about I'm not assessing my one-to-one program. I'm assessing personalized learning. I'm assessing my curriculum integration and then moving forward from there.
Yep, and if you notice the way that they have this, so there's each one of these 7 gears, and they call them gears with the idea, to your point, that if any one of these gears is not turning, then none of the gears turn. So it's not just about, oh, technology is going really great, we got all this stuff, and we're scoring an 8 out of 10 on that. But if you're a 4 on professional development and you're a 4 on leadership, well then it doesn't really matter if you have the devices. Kind of like what we've been saying the entire day. So thank you to all the panelists that joined today. We're out of time, but I really appreciate you guys taking the time to answer those questions, and thank you for attending. I hope we'll be in touch. All right.